So at the time, I we had been married for just shy of 17 years. Two kids, they're both in their early teens. And yeah, this was it had we had been struggling for a couple of years prior to the divorce being established. We had seen a counselor, both independently and then together, which neither of us saw any benefit from. And then my now ex-wife, she started seeing a counselor that she seemed to get some benefit from, but it didn't net us as a couple any benefit. Um, so that yeah, um, where all of this left me was initially there was just a lot of frustration and probably some anger with the situation. There was some alcohol related issues and um, just things, you know, a lot of things that had never happened before in our marriage that I just wasn't happy with. And I also know, my ex wasn't happy either. And so once the divorce was established, something about that really just shook my foundation. And it went from frustration, anger to a lot of guilt, remorse, feeling like a failure, um, all things I was not prepared for and didn't know how to deal with.
Yeah, that
um,
anger is kind of got more energy to it, right? Like it's easier to be in the anger than it is to be in all of the rest of that pain.
yeah, and I think a big part of me thought, right, marriage, there's the ups and downs, and this will pass. And it just seemed to continue down a road that wasn't going to be passed. And looking back now, I probably ignored a lot of signs from family and friends that would, hey, how's everything going? Are you sure you're doing all right? And things like, people not wanting to come over and visit anymore, like all of these little things, I just didn't have much of an awareness around.
Yeah, you were like,
Um,
we're pushing through it.
yeah, I just figured, the storm has lasted much longer than I expected, but it's still a storm.
Yeah. All storms have
So
an end at some point.
yes, so I just didn't anticipate it ending this way.
Tell me when it did or when it became apparent that that's what was happening, and all of those feelings came up for you. How did that impact you as far as kind of day to day life, functioning and work and all of that?
Yeah, that it was very, very difficult. I remember early on, actually, one of the first calls that I did with you and the group calls. I asked, is it normal to be shaky? I was just, my body would shake, my arms, my hands. It was like, not like you were cold shivering. It was a different kind of shake, and my back from the like top of my shoulders all the way down my spine just ached. And I was still going to the gym and doing stuff, but it wasn't workout sore. It was different, and it was just all of that stress and more or less being kind of in like a fight or flight mode. So concentration was very difficult. Um, and then just overall outlook on life and on anything was very, very low. Very, very low opinion of myself, and tons of negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I was just looking through some of our earlier notes and you had written about that shakiness too, right? That nervous system just being so distressed.
Yeah. Yeah. I can remember for over 24 hours. Obviously, I don't remember if while I was sleeping, I don't think it was happening then, but, from the time I woke up, it was just, like, really? This again today?
Really, is this how we're gonna feel all day?
Yeah.
Tell me when you're in a place like that, especially with the negative self-talk, um, and just that low outlook on things, it can be really hard to do anything, right? At all, much less to do
Yeah.
something to help yourself because you're judging yourself. What do you think it was
Yeah.
that enabled you to say yes to my program or to say yes to any program? Like, what was it that helped you say, um, yes, I'm going to do something, I'm going to try something?
I think there was definitely a realization that um, I needed outside assistance. And while I have a ton of friends and family that want to support, I didn't go that route because there was a lot of opinion
Mm,
associated with, there were plenty of people who wanted to support, but that wasn't unbiased. They were, you know, I can remember my dad. My dad is just mad at that whole my ex's side of the situation. You shouldn't have to put up with this. And I'm like, okay, dad, I get it, but that's not helping me now.
like
So
I do have to right now.
yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't um that was another reason for taking this course is my parents went through a divorce, and my dad is still has I mean, after 20 some years, he still has that. And I just knew in myself, I didn't want to carry that. I didn't want to carry that around. Um, so, uh,
Yeah, that's probably some of what was coming out for him, right? His anger at your ex-wife,
very, very
and
much
some of
so.
his anger still at your mom. Yeah.
Yeah. So the decision do, to join your coursework was very easy for me because all of the videos, all of the topics, I mean, they were just so spot on. And it seemed like the absolute best thing for me to do you know to start down a path, because I had already sourced a counselor um locally that didn't pan out. It was a complete waste of time. um and then also just it's at times hard enough to schedule the time, but then you're having to drive somewhere to get somewhere by some time. And so the ability of it to be online appealed to me, even though I don't know, I didn't think it would, because
Yeah.
I thought maybe it would be less personal being over video. But
Yeah, there's something about
um
being in a room with somebody. Right?
yeah, but the experience I've had with yourself, and even on the calls with the other people, it really is a comfortable personal space. And no, it's been fantastic.
It's the online piece. I think you lose. I think you sacrifice either way, but you win either way too. Because there is something about being in a room and having the physical presence. Um, but I think being online creates a lot of safety because you can always just close your computer. Okay? And I think
Yeah.
especially in this work, sometimes it's easier to be vulnerable or let yourself be emotional because there's a little bit of space. It's been my experience that sometimes we actually get there faster, um, in part because it is, I guess, a degree less personal because there is that screen. Tommy, let's talk about what's changed. Can you tell me what, compared to that just shaky fight or flight state, the negative self-talk, how are you doing now?
Well, I'm doing much better now, and I can tell you with all the certainty in the world, the moment that began to change was right after we had our one-on-one call.
Okay.
And it was a super great experience, but I still am a little in disbelief at how you were able to, within about 5 or 10 minutes, it was like you walked into a maze and you knew where to go. Like, just in our conversation, you went right there, and we started, talking about and digging into some past experiences and things. And it was those tools that we discussed. You had asked me to work on my negative self-talk, imagining there's a younger version of myself sitting right next to me. And what would that little boy think? And so that, I still use that today. I don't have to use it as often, but um that was like the turning point. And then from there I was able to grasp onto the ideas and the coursework. I was more available to understand, rather than just reading words and listening to videos of the coursework. I was more available to digest it.
Okay. Like you had that kind of felt sense experience
Yeah,
and made
like
it.
I was too much in my own head
Hmm.
prior.
Yeah.
So once some of that, I guess, just guilt and bad feelings, once some of that kind of simmered down, there was room for growth, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like once that like top layer of guilt or shame peels back, you can really look at
Yep.
what's left.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me, how is it translated into your external life? How does the day to day look different now than it did before?
Um. Yeah. It's so much different. I guess. Trying to think back now. I mean, I remember just there was a lot of just dreading the day. Um. There was a lot of um just doubt with dumb things, doubt with things that I would never normally question. um there was less patience throughout the day. There, like, everything was, anything positive was just kind of like turning the volume down. It wasn't, my capacity for any of that was less. And it was very easy to see the negative in anything. The somebody cut you off on the road, and that must be because of all of these other things. That your mind just went that way, or my mind just went that way.
Yeah.
um but now, a lot of that negative emotion has been just better understood, and my opinion of myself has been raised. And it doesn't seem like it's me versus the world anymore. In a sense that, it seemed like before.
Yeah. That's I think it's a really common experience that kind of the intensity of what you're experiencing with the divorce puts this like negative filter on everything. And it feels like it's not just your ex-wife against you, but it's everything is
Yeah.
firing against you. Um,
Yeah.
so tell me, what does that look like for you at work? Does anything feel different in your professional life?
Yeah. I know that my capacity has increased, as far as not feeling so overwhelmed. My level of detail has increased, just with, not having callbacks for things, or, hey, I got everything except I didn't get any of XYZ. And then I'm thinking, oh shoot, I forgot to give you that too. Just, so a lot of that has gone away, and the capacity to feel like I can do more, and And then even just the feeling afterwards, completing a project, it was just kind of a blank feeling before, but now I feel a little bit of reward from, all right, nice, that one's off the list. Let's move to the next one.
A little more satisfaction maybe in that
Yeah.
process. Um, how about in terms of dealing with your ex-wife? Tommy, how has that dynamic shifted as you've done all of this work on yourself?
That has been better. Your coursework, I think it's your coursework 5 on the communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's been super helpful in trying to remember the exact thing that you had talked about, but basically it just goes back to doing the best you can to leave some of the emotion at the door, and not having elevated voices or elevated, if you can stay a little on the neutral side, but also not being afraid to be vulnerable, in the sense that, if you're not in agreement with something, you don't have to go right for an attack, like, this is BS. No, we're not doing that. You can go the route of, well, hey, I'm scared that if this is the way it goes, I won't be able to see my kids, or I won't be able to have that time. You can, by communicating that way, it sets a different stage than one of frustration.
Yeah. Um, Tommy, I already know the answer to this because you've talked about it some on calls and in some of your coursework. But I know some guys listening to this are going to be like, "Are you kidding me? Be vulnerable with my ex-wife, who's been this like aggressive, angry, vicious monster." So I want to ask you, when you've done that, when you've been able to show up from that vulnerable place and talk about what it's really about for you, like, I'm scared, that I'm going to lose time with the kids, or what the consequences of this is going to be. Um, how has it worked in terms of her response?
Yeah, I mean, it diffuses it.
Mm,
Um, it and I think on her end, it diffuses, and then, she'll kind of try it a different way and ask it same question a different way, and, kind of get a little animated, and then I'm able to just respond similarly, but not, like, with no aggression, no frustration, just, being more honest and transparent. And not that I ever felt I was dishonest. I think really it comes down to just an awareness of all of the different feelings and emotions that exist. Um, that was one thing that really helped me at the beginning, was your big list of positive and negative emotions. And, the only thing I could verbalize when I was new to the class is I felt terrible. Like, that was the only word that came to my mind. But I see this list of 100 different things, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I probably feel about 80 of those negative ones right now.
yeah, look at how
So
many different ways we can feel terrible.
yeah, so I think, better describing that is helpful to whoever you're communicating with. They're able to see, what it is that you're apprehensive about, or you're scared about, and it just changes the conversation.
Yeah, it's like they can have more empathy maybe for you because you've been able to verbalize or explain what you're actually experiencing
Yeah.
beyond it's awful or
Yeah,
it's terrible.
exactly.
Yeah. Uh, Tell me, how about dating? I know you've talked about kind of dipping your toes into the dating world. Is that something you're open to sharing, or is it kind of
Yeah.
too soon to talk about?
Yeah, no, that's been interesting, maybe even a little weird. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been 20 years since I've dated, and I don't really feel like I liked dating before. and don't feel like I was good at it before. I don't have a lot of experience. I haven't had a lot of past partners, so I don't have this massive pool of information to go back to or try to figure out. So now that there's, work schedules and kid schedules and custody schedules and all these different responsibilities from what back when I was 20,
Right.
you
Dating
didn't
was a
have
little
any
different.
responsibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just okay, you want to go to the park today, then you call in, no big deal. So, that just that and that's just on my side. Who now you have somebody else that probably equally same responsibilities or very similar. So now you got all of this to navigate. So that took a bit to wrap my head around and just understand, well, even if it was perfect, what does it look like?
Oh,
You
interesting.
know,
Right. Yeah.
and so, it did take some time. I ended up using a one of the online dating sites that pairs up your personalities and stuff. And yeah, I've been dating a woman for a couple of months now, and yeah, we're in a way we're almost like twins the way we think, and yeah, it's been pretty amazing.
Tommy, just to give people kind of a frame of reference, how long ago did you and your wife first decide that the marriage was over? Because I know there wasn't the physical separation for a while, but like how long has it been since the kind of divorce was decided?
Divorce was decided in February of this year, 2023.
Okay. Yeah, and so here we are in October. Um, and you already now have a couple months into this relationship where it sounds like it's really weird, complicated, different, but a really solid connection.
Yeah, super solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my girlfriend now, she's been through a divorce, and we've talked a lot about the processes on both sides, and you know we've had the conversation, if we would have met each other in our 20s, would this have been the same? And we've both kind of concluded that we don't think so. This has been a complete learning journey,
Mm.
you know all of these years, and they haven't all been bad years for either of our marriages, but all of these lessons you learn along the way and things you learn along the way, um, have prepared us to be available and to meet each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty empowering perspective, right? That
Yeah,
I needed these experiences, I needed these hardships, these challenges in order to be able to enjoy this relationship on this level.
yeah, for sure. And I know that she's um well, maybe I should back up and say from a male standpoint, it's maybe not taboo, but to say that you're doing counseling is like, oh man, you
Mm.
must be really screwed up.
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I told her on our first date, I said, hey, I'm working on this coursework, and this is what it's about. And that for her was a huge turn on. She was very excited to hear that I would seek help, and I was open to that and learning and wanting to make myself better. That was very interesting to her. And that was something that, she's happy that I'm doing. So I wouldn't have expected that answer, but
Yeah.
you know,
That's
it's
interesting. I'm gonna have to shift my marketing. Be like, you should do this
yeah,
program because girls are really good. Like, uh,
yeah, maybe,
no, and honestly, it
maybe,
doesn't surprise me, right? Because I think that's the complaint that you kind of hear, at least in the world of the internet, from women is, well, he didn't want to do the work, or
yeah,
unfortunately, I know working with you and my other clients that there's a lot of women who don't want to do the work either. But
Yep.
there are a lot that are actively doing it and trying to grow and learn. Um,
Yeah.
and it sounds
And
like,
from,
yeah.
yeah, from what I can tell, the thing that I think has helped me the most, and I think the thing that she appreciates the most, it really comes down to just the awareness,
Mm,
the ability to know what you're feeling and being able to set boundaries. I mean, I remember that first time I heard that, all I kept thinking is like the center divider on a highway, the boundaries, what's
right, we're
boundaries?
not crossing this line.
Yeah, but so that stuff's it's good to have, it's healthy and it keeps both parties in check. So just some of those tools that I'll carry forever now. I didn't have those tools before.
That's the crazy part, right? Because I mean, you've picked these tools up in a very short period of time. You're applying them successfully with your ex-wife. You're applying them in this new relationship. You're like, yep, got him, gonna carry him forward, have him my whole life. That's what I find both hopeful and kind of crazy in doing this work with you guys. Tommy, it's like, why don't we learn this stuff when we're kids? Like, why isn't there a
Yeah,
school course on emotions and another one on communication? And um,
yeah. Well, I think there's a pretty big shift in the world as far as this goes. I don't know if this is considered mental health by any means, but if I look back at my grandfather and then my dad and then me and then I look towards my son, the things my son and I talk about, my grandfather wouldn't even talk to himself about. There's just
right.
like, that in a way that permission to ask yourself, there's a lot of, even if you were religious, there's some things that you just don't talk about, you don't bring up, you don't talk back to the priest or God. If he said that, then that's it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of mental blocks in previous, in older generations, and I think that's shift is slowly changing to more of a world of acceptance and understanding, um and seeing this as like, I really see this as like the gym for your mind. Because it's challenging. It really makes you think, and
You have to do it
it
consistently and do the
yes,
exercises.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
it takes active engagement, but um yeah, I mean, I'm just amazed at the difference. And I remember talking to you about this. I did feel bad at one point when I started to feel better. Maybe I was a month in, and I've been really concentrating on the coursework, and and then as soon as I started feeling better, I kind of started not participating as much.
mm,
And so it does take, you really gotta stick with it, because there are continuing benefits from working through all of that coursework.
yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, Tommy, because I think a lot of times in the beginning there's kind of a desperation, right? I've got to get out of this
Yeah.
fight or flight response. And you do, and it's like, oh, thank goodness I can
Yeah.
relax and breathe. And then it's that motivation to keep showing up is kind of like going to the gym. Like it is work. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned that.
It's almost like when I started, there was a huge weight on me, and maybe after the first month, the weight was removed, so I was back to neutral. But you know, with the coursework now, I feel lighter. Things are easier to do.
Right. That, yeah, no, that's interesting too, right? Because especially when the marriage isn't going so well, like what felt normal before the divorce still wasn't great. And then
Yep.
there's the weight with the divorce, and then that gets lifted and you're kind of back to that neutral
Yep.
ground. and you maybe aren't even aware that there's a lighter place to go until
Yeah.
you start getting
No,
um,
exactly.
because I
Yeah.
think a lot of
All
us have
your,
been in neutral for so long, right? Like it goes back way before the marriage that
exactly. Yeah. So to have that positive outlook is, yeah, no, it's been great.
Tommy, just one last question for you. If you were talking to somebody who was where you were like last February, and you know how intense that can be and also how difficult it can be to see the hope or to see that there could be an improvement, what would you say to that person? Maybe if you could even go back to yourself then. Are there any words of advice or encouragement that you would share?
Yeah, I actually have a good friend of mine who's going through a similar time, and so I went through and kind of picked out a couple of the videos I watched of yours early on.
Yeah.
He's found them very helpful. Um, but yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is that for me was I thought, basically it's the end, almost like the end of my life in a way.
Yeah.
And even though I love my kids and I would never leave them or abandon them in any way, it was just a super dark time. So I think knowing what I know now is that, it's not the end. It's it's uh it's the start of a new beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, Tommy, I think, I mean, even the statistics, right? The suicide rate for men going through divorce is high. So I think a lot of people feel that like feels like an ending and there isn't a beginning.
Yeah, no, I certainly went through a period of time where I felt like that. And yeah, that's a very, very tough, terrible spot to be for sure. So
I
yeah,
think
just knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but I think for me before this coursework, I looked outside
mm,
into other people, other things for, you know, uh validation, happiness.
right.
And this coursework's helped me realize that more of that is inside.
Mm,
And so once that inside begins to fix, like all the outside stuff just becomes so much easier and it's so much more natural.
yeah, it's there's less pressure on it to be
Yeah.
perfect. Um,
Yep.
Tommy, thank you so much for sharing some of your story and your time. Is there
No,
anything
you got
else
it.
that you would want to share or say? Oh,
Not that I could think of.
okay. Yeah, Tommy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I love listening to you. You know, I've kind of gotten to follow along with you in this journey, but listening to you talk
Mhm.
about it, what strikes me is how quickly you've made these changes. Uh,
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I can remember signing up and thinking, "Are you kidding me? This is going to take 6 months." That sounds like an
so quick.
eternity. It's not. I mean, it just sounded like, can I just flip a switch and tomorrow I'm better?
You're like, because
Um,
I can't do this for 6 months, right? What I'm doing.
yes, yeah, but it's been. I see now how it's necessary because there's times and with the coursework it just you're introduced to maybe like learning a language. You can
Mm,
learn a whole bunch of words, but then you got to take time to kind of stew on those words, think about them, get them familiar in your head.
yeah.
You almost have to pause for a minute before you take on the next idea or the next portion of the course before you can you can't just cram like an
No.
old college paper and just do 6 months of videos and answer questions. You can't do it in 2 days. I mean, maybe you could, but I don't think there'd be value there. I think it takes time to set in, and it was just real well laid out, because you have the way you have the goals set up, when you finish one, call it block of training, there's a reminder that, okay, hey, in a week or in 2 weeks, you should be starting this or you should be answering this by this date. So it kind of helps move the process along. But I felt that at an appropriate rate. I didn't really ever feel pressured to have to do things. And there were plenty of times where it'd be multiple days, even a week, and I wouldn't do anything.
Mhm.
But you
Things
spend
are
a couple
happening
hours,
somewhere.
yeah, spend a couple hours and dial down and get work through some of it. So no, that's the way it is all laid out has been very helpful.
Good. Well, Tommy, as you were saying, like you had kind of the initial expectation, like, oh my gosh, it's going to take 6 months. Like that's
Yeah,
terrible. But you're right. It's kind of learning an emotional language. And you have to feel it because if you just know it, it doesn't fix it. And so it does
yeah,
take the nervous system some time to feel it. When you were talking about it, it reminded me too. I think you told me at one point, a couple months in, that initially you thought some of the exercises seemed really silly. Um,
yeah,
but you did them anyway. And I was so
yep,
grateful to you both for trying them, but also for sharing that with me. Because I'm in it just all the time. And I'm like, oh well, this is what
yeah,
how it works. And I forget what it feels like and some of it does seem either really silly or too simple. Um,
yeah,
it's been such a helpful insight for me to remember when I'm supporting people in the beginning to let them know like this is going to feel silly or stupid or weird or ineffective, but push through that and give it the work.
yeah,
Um,
yep. No, I can tell you for probably a week or more, I can remember, even driving in traffic, say, frustration. I see you right now. I feel you. I know you're there, and you're not going to be there forever.
yeah.
And it was like, yeah, I'm saying this for an hour in my head, sitting in traffic. But, as funny as it is now and as elementary as it seemed at the time, it it did something. It changed something in me, and yeah, there was a definite positive result from working with that and through that.
Well, Tommy, thank you for sticking out the silly stuff and committing to it. And thank you so much for sharing some of it.